The Exorcist, released in 1973, directed by William Friedkin, based on the best-selling novel by William Peter Blatty. The movie is about an actress named Chris McNeil, played by Ellen Burstyn. She's filming a movie in an idyllic Georgetown neighborhood around Washington, D.C., where she lives with her daughter Regan, played by Linda Blair. One day, Regan starts exhibiting some strange symptoms. Her behavior becomes erratic. She starts to break out into moments of seemingly unmotivated violence and shocking obscenity. As her symptoms grow steadily more extreme, Chris turns to a series of medical experts for help, but after witnessing totally inexplicable phenomena, like Regan's bed shaking of its own accord, objects flying around her room, and watching her daughter's personality become totally subsumed by some other horrible demonic presence, she realizes she needs to turn elsewhere for help. Enter a priest, Father Karras, played by Jason Miller, a man losing his faith after the passing of his elderly mother, who is forced to recognize the fact that only an exorcism will save Regan's life. He enlists the help of an older, more experienced priest, Father Marin, played by Max von Sydow. Together, the two of them attempt to reclaim Regan's soul from the hands of pure evil. This movie hit in a big, big way when it was released. Along with movies like Rosemary's Baby in 1968, The Exorcist helped inaugurate something of a return to major studio prestige horror productions. Horror had become mostly the domain of B movies by 1973, and in spite of high quality, low-budget output by companies like Hammer, most mainstream audiences hadn't really taken horror seriously since the days of the Universal Monster movie in the 1930s. The Exorcist was seen as something different, a classy, respectable release. It starred actors who were not known for doing horror movies and was made by an Academy Award-winning director. William Friedkin approached making The Exorcist like he was making a serious drama, insisting on absolute realism in every detail, from special effects, which were all strictly in camera, to performances and set design. His perfectionism resulted in a supernatural horror film that was far more convincing, disturbingly so, than anything that would have been seen previously by audiences at that time. Friedkin set a new standard for how far a popular horror movie could go, how boundary-pushing it could be, how visceral and graphic it could be in attempting to frighten its audience. The 70s would prove to be an unprecedented time for taboo-shattering horror. By the time The Exorcist was being made, there were already early rumblings of this new sensibility, as can be seen in independent films like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead in 1968 and Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left in 1972. The Exorcist, like these films, was highly controversial when it came out. Allegedly, it upset, disgusted, and all but traumatized its first viewers. Few of them had ever seen anything this intense or disturbing before. Some people hated it. Most thought it was the scariest film they'd ever seen. It was a huge hit, and today is commonly regarded as one of the best horror films of the 70s, and one of the greatest horror films ever made.
You know, for me, it's... Your intro was very well written, I gotta say. I think it definitely captures just how much respect and legacy this movie has, but just on a personal level, I think it's always been a movie that I've been sort of terrified by, even before I watched it. I think they did such a amazing job with the makeup on Linda Blair.
Yes.
Just the image of possessed Regan was an image that haunted my nightmares when I was a kid. Just that appearing in random ephemera, you know, just on TV or just in a book. That image was so disturbing and so scary. Even before I had seen the movie, it was something that I was terrified of.
I wish I could recall a more personal reaction like that, like the first time I saw it. I know I was disturbed by it. I don't know that I was ever really terrified by the movie, but it was one that has always held a deep, deep fascination for me. I think because of the way William Friedkin made it. I don't know if he was somebody who actually believed in God or the devil or not. He's given a lot of comments and they sort of imply that he's more of an agnostic, but whether or not he truly does believe, he directs this movie as if he believes completely in everything that he's showing you. Because he makes no distinction, in between how he's filming something that is real and something that is supernatural, because they're one and the same for the purposes of the story, it makes us feel, when we're watching it, that we are seeing a kind of reality on screen. And I think that's what makes it so effective and so fascinating, is it's so much more convincing than a typical horror movie.
It's just a great case of the right people at the right time. William Peter Blatty even wasn't necessarily known for writing horror scripts or horror stories. He was a comedy writer. I know he had written the Clouseau movie, A Shot in the Dark. And so The Exorcist, even for him, was kind of a strange project. It was something that he felt was a bit of a one-off of like, I'll write my horror story and then I'll get back to writing comedy. And then it ended up being the thing that he will forever be associated with and be known for. Immediately, it really sets up a normal world, a kind of calm, especially in the family, in the McNeil family, of this mother and her daughter. And they're kind of a famous, affluent family. They're rich and the mother is famous, this respected actor. But at home, it's a very tender, loving atmosphere. Reagan's this very sweet child, and she's kind of this creative spirit that makes these weird toy puppet things.
That's like, right.
These like little figurines that she likes to make. Really makes you feel that sense of security and that calm before there's anything mildly creepy that happens. There is the opening in Iraq, which is strange, but even that it's not really scary. It's just atmospheric. It's just sort of building this kind of calm
and a dread.
Yeah, absolutely, about what's to come. And that to me is what really truly makes it disturbing once stuff really starts to occur, once the supernatural phenomena starts to happen, because it feels like a real world. It feels like a very identifiable, relatable world, and with happening to characters that we like and that we empathize with, and we don't want to see these things happen to because they're good people and they don't deserve any of what's about to happen to them.
I've seen this movie probably 5 or 6 times now at this point. And when you watch it that many times, you start to notice certain things. You start to notice how strong a grasp Friedkin has in the way he makes this movie of pacing, story construction, dramatic escalation. You start to see how precise his orchestration of every moment is, so that he can generate maximum impact. Exactly like what you were talking about, like creating a contrast in scenes early on with the scenes later on. Friedkin really understands the importance of buildup. He knows the horror needs to start small, so at first he gives us little things like verbal comments. There's a bit early on when Regan says her bed is shaking. We don't see that the first time it's brought up. We see it later after we've built up to it. And he does know exactly how much time and space to give us in those early scenes so that we get accustomed to that tone, the sweetness and the closeness of the relationship, like you said. So that when he starts hitting us with those really coarse, shocking moments, like when Regan is swearing at people and urinating on the floor, we are genuinely deeply shocked. It's because that contrast is so strong that that effect hits us with full strength. And some of the moments in this movie, like the crucifix scene and some of the others, like those are still as shocking today as they were in 1973. And that's really saying something, considering how far horror movies have been allowed to go since then. This movie still has that impact. The whole movie, in essence, is about building up to the final exorcism sequence. It's about getting us into the bedroom at the very end with the 2 priests and investing us completely in that climax. That's what the whole movie is really working to do, is to make sure that when we get there, we cannot turn away. It's essential when we watch Linda Blair that we believe we're seeing a little girl, and then at the end of the movie that we believe she has transformed into something monstrous, or that she is truly something else and not the same person we saw at the beginning of the movie. If that doesn't work, then nothing in the movie works. And it does. And that's because it's a lot of different elements all working in harmony. It's elaborate sound design. It's the voiceover performance by Mercedes McCambridge. It's the prosthetic and makeup effects by Dick Smith. It's even this careful lighting strategy by cinematographer Owen Roizman. There's a very subtle contribution that he gives in shifting the color temperatures from warm to cold as the movie goes along. And most importantly, this unbelievable performance from Linda Blair. She is totally convincing. And when we see her in that final sequence, we don't even believe that it's the same person. It's everything coming together seamlessly, creating this experience that really has lost none of its power. It still unsettles and it still disturbs.